Hi everyone and welcome back today. I'm doing a review here of some gear. I'm actually doing a new series offering you a lot of gear, reviews and comprehensive looks at some music technology out there that may be as useful for you as it is for me. So today we're doing something kind of strange and offbeat. I am profiling what is called a Keydog. And if you're not familiar with a Keydog, we could play a guessing game and see if you think you know what this is. This is a device that I think is very innovative. It doesn't plug into anything, but what it does is it allows you to take any number of keys on a keyboard, full size or a mini one like my Arturio here, and you can hold down the keys in such a way that you can create infinite drones, much like a latch function would work on a lot of keyboards out there, but not all keyboards, and certainly not old classic keyboards like organs. It won't obviously work on a piano, but it will work on anything that has sustain. So we'll talk today about what the Keydog is. This will not be a long review, but it will give you a sense of how you might use these innovative steel devices in your own work. And the advantage of a Keydog is that you don't have to get that masking tape or blue painter's tape and tape the key down. And I know you've done it, I've done it, we've all done it in our old garage bands and so forth when we wanted that 10-minute drone of a pad or whatever. So let's talk about the Keydog today and see if this might work for your music setup. So here we are for the unboxing of the KV Gear Keydog, and there isn't a lot of unboxing to explain here. These actually do come in plastic containers. I bought them years back from Perfect Circuit down in Southern California, and quite obviously they are very simple to understand in terms of their use. There isn't a lot to really understand here in terms of the unboxing, but for me this really kind of filled a slight gap, and I'm not saying it's a big gap. Again, with latch keys, the possibilities are endless in a lot of software and hardware to do some of the same things. Of course, as I'll mention later in this example, when we hear some sounds of these working, there is a nice tactile sense to these. They're well made. The current versions I've seen online are actually orange. And I'll just put up right now KV Gear's website. So they do a lot of cool keyboard stands. They make stands that are very useful for adding gear to the top of your synthesizers. They do some cool Volca stands. So they have a very clear and specific range of accessories that they sell. And these, again, are very specific to this one purpose. In the old days, I remember doing this back in high school with bands. We would get some blue tape, sometimes some masking tape if we didn't have that. We would take the key that we wanted, because in those days we didn't have a lot of this gear, or really the ability, we didn't have latching on a lot of our keyboards back in the day, like a CZ101 or something. Of course, you could do this with sustain. There are different ways to do this with your parameters on your synthesizer. But what we would do is, if we wanted a really long drone tone to play 3 minutes throughout a song, and then we could go back on our old Tascam 4-track and add some effects to it and adjust the levels and equalization. We would want a very long tone, so we would take our tape. It works better on full-size keys. And then we would do that. And actually, you can see it kind of pops up. You often have to get it under the keyboard. If this were on a keyboard stand, you could accomplish that certainly, but it's just the annoyance of having to use masking tape or painter's tape for the purpose of trying to sustain a drone or create an arpeggiated sequence or something. So hence the purpose of the Keydog, which allows you to hold down any key. It could be a black key, it could be a white key. It works with full-size keys and also mini keys. So for me, the use of it is being able to very quickly use something that is tactile and something that also clearly defines what key is being pressed. So very simple, and maybe the simplest piece of gear I could possibly own or use in my studio, but I find that these are super useful for some very specific purposes when I'm trying to create drones or arpeggiated sequences. Well, and in terms of features, it's kind of silly to even talk about this. Obviously, there's one main feature, and that is to hold a key down. If you're curious, they're very heavy. They're made of metal. They're solid. They are just heavy enough to allow you to hold the key down. If you're at all curious, they are 6.3 ounces, and we'll see if these are uniform. I'm not sure. That's exactly 6.3. 6.3. So there you have it. They're exactly all 6.3 ounces in terms of the weight. So that's going to be enough to hold down most keys again on most keyboards, whether it's a black key or a white key. And these also include a nice soft surface on the bottom, so you're not going to scratch up your keys. Obviously, if this were metallic on the bottom, you might have some concerns about that, although probably most of us, we bang our gear around a little bit unless we're vintage collectors and we're trying to keep our gear in pristine condition. Okay, so we can take a look at how to use the Keydogs, and they're obviously very simple, no need for explanation, but so we can use these with full-size keys or mini keys like the Arturia keystep or any other mini controller you might have. So one idea is I could use this to create drones. So if I want to make an A minor chord or something like that, I just would place the Keydog down, and you can use black or white keys. Again, full size or mini keys would work. Presumably you could also use it with an organ. Obviously a piano would not be designed for this purpose, since we're really looking at something that's going to be sustained over time. And one of the things that KV Gear mentions on their website is, one concept here is you could use this to create a drone and then do some improvisation on top of it. And because of the fact that you can see exactly an A is being played, it has an advantage, you could say, over a sustain pedal, which wouldn't always work in every case, and it has an advantage over latch keys. Some keyboards maybe would have a light that would show you which key is being depressed and latch, but if you forget that, it's nice to have the visual sense to be able to look at it and say, I'm playing an A, and then I can add an E to that. And I just have this running through the Bernard Herrmann strings in Contact. And so again, I could add another note to the chord if I wanted to, a high C, and so forth. It's pretty self-explanatory. And I think one of the things you could think about in terms of your own use is just how many of the Keydogs you'd want to order in terms of being able to create, obviously, triads versus dyads versus bigger chords with sevenths and ninths and so forth, if you wanted to use it for those purposes. Now, in some cases, you might just want to have one tone playing for the sake of maybe a recording that you're doing where you don't want to have to physically sit there and hold the key down. Now, of course, in your software, you could go in and simply extend the length of the note as long as you wanted, just after depressing it for a second. So there are a lot of ways, obviously, around this in terms of software that you could think about. Now, you could also potentially use it with Eurorack. Anything that obviously is a keyboard setup like this that has a CV out could be useful for you as far as a gate or a trigger out. Keep in mind that a lot of times Eurorack is not set up for polyphony, so it may not work in that same way. And in a lot of cases with your Eurorack modules, it's really easy through a series of different techniques to obviously create a long sustained tone. In fact, so many of our VCO modules likely will have that ability to create a permanent sustain, to create drones and so forth. Even some effects modules like the Erica Black DSP2 has a very specific, I think it's the last number in the parameters, has a very specific drone feature. So there are a lot of ways to create drones besides using something like the Keydog. But in my mind, there's a value to these because of their simplicity. I think they also look kind of cool in terms of the physicality of them, doing something more mechanical, pressing down a key on a keyboard versus a sustain pedal or a latch key. Again, with a sustain pedal, won't always work in every situation depending on your settings. And also there's the fact that you have to physically hold something down. And quite obviously, in addition to playing drones, another thing that could be useful for you, particularly with a lot of current MIDI keyboards out there, is the ability to use latching to define your various intervals in terms of arpeggiation. So I can have the arpeggiation set here on the key step, and then I could choose my note and put the Keydog there to hold that note. And as long as I want that to play, it's going to just use that foundation note, the A there, for the arpeggiator. Again, depending on my settings, I could add another note to it. And you'll hear some variation here just because I have actually you won't hear with octave A's, but I do have the random setting on this, so it's going to mix up the intervals in terms of what notes are selected. And then I can choose a third note. And so again, it's just an opportunity, I think, for a studio musician, if you're using it, to have some easy abilities to lay down something that's repetitive or anything that's sustained or over a long term that you need some long musical tracks for. This could definitely get the job done. Again, there are other ways to do this with software, with other mechanical devices, but for me the Keydog is useful because of its simplicity and that visual ability to see exactly which keys are being depressed at any given time. Okay, so that is it on the Keydog. I think a very innovative piece of technology. It's not super technical, it's not super complicated, but boy, does it sure do some great things in terms of allowing you to sustain a drone for as long as you want. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more reviews in the future.